Hello and welcome back to our series on beginning app script for HR brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions. And in today's video, I would like to continue on with our very simple dashboard that we're using here. And again, this is not going to be a straight out of the box, run with it sort of dashboard. What we're doing is we're creating this very simple dashboard to ensure that we have operational knowledge of what's actually occurring and creating code snippets that we can use in your future journey of Google Apps Script and automation. So what we have so far is we have our dependent drop-down boxes. This is a cascading drop-down boxes to where the second drop-down box is dependent, or the values are dependent on whatever the value of the first drop-down is. So we can come up here to employee and it'll change the values there. And then we can go back down to people analytics and then it'll clear it and change the values. And then we can select it. So now what I did was, you'll notice that this is now going away when this first drop down box is. And I'll show you what I did there, because I also want to come in here and clean up the rest of this, because it wasn't going away when certain things were selected. And anytime that you place something on a spreadsheet with Google Apps Script, it's always a good idea to figure out how you're going to get rid of it, because we're not always going to need this. So I want to go back and have it removed. Like you'll notice, okay, now it's clearing. I'll show you what I did there to clear that out. But in today's video, what I really like to do is change this around a little bit, because we have the company level and it populates this employee head count and then does some analysis on the back end, our Google Apps Script side, to find the total number of our employees. And if you remember, our data is coming to us in the form of an array, and each inner array is a row of data. So we're getting all of this data here, and it's coming to us in a two-dimensional array. And each one of those inner arrays is a row. So really all we needed to do is find the length of that array, and we would come up with how many employees we had, which is 15. And then what we did, but what we want to do is, if this is the company level, why can't we just have company and then all of our divisions up here to see the whole picture? Because right now we have that in our division level view. And what we can simply do is just take all of this, put company over here and move them all over one. And then in our division level, we can create another drop down. So another cascading drop down at the third level, so a person can select what division it is to filter by, and then it will only show that division data. And this would come in handy if you were creating a dashboard, say, for the managers of each division, because obviously they're going to not just want to know the head count, but they're also going to know other things like salary. And what we'll do, our next line will be average salary of every employee in there. But for now, let's just go ahead and take care of that. Let's copy this over to our company and add that company column. So how I got this dashboard frame to clear was, I took this, and this clears that dashboard, that entire dashboard, starting from, I believe it was C1. And I placed it up here in our create DD. So anytime that we push that create drop down from that menu item, it would clear it. And then also, anytime something changed within that first drop down box, I also cleared it there. And then on open, we'll have it cleared there as well. So that's how I was able to clear those. So now let's go back down here and start focusing on moving some stuff around. So you'll notice that when we are setting our headers here, we're doing it every single cell. So that's kind of redundant when we can do it a different way. If you remember, we can set the values, and to set the values, we can actually set an array of these values. So I created something ahead of time just so you didn't have to watch me create it. And this is a two-dimensional array of our division titles to include a company. So what we can do is actually populate this in this range right here. So we're wanting to start at row 1, column 5, and go and include one row, which means that it's only going to be one inner array. And then we want to go over, looks like 7 columns. So let's go ahead and build that out. Now that we have this array, we can use it. So let's go dashboard, SS, and we want to get the range, and we want that range to start at row 1, column 5. We only want one row, and then we want to include 7 columns. And then what we want to do is set values, and values is looking for a two-dimensional array. Well, since we created our variable as a two-dimensional array, we can just simply call that. And you'll also remember that we created some formatting here, and we took each one of these titles and bolded it and italicized it. So we can just copy this and add it to the end of that instruction line. And now that we have this, we don't need all of this. So we took all those rows and condensed it down into 2 rows. Now, if we save this and go back, let's go ahead and refresh. We should clear our drop down. Yep, sure did. So now when we go back to our people analytics and select the division level, it works the same way. It just takes a lot less code. It's actually quicker because what it's actually doing is it's going cell by cell. Initially, the way we had it before, it's going cell by cell and setting that value. And here it's just setting it in one swoop. So that's good. So now let's take all of this and move it from the division level to the company level. So it'll be right here. So let's come back over to our code here. And now what we're wanting to do is to grab, let's indent this. We want to grab all of this, this whole thing right here, cut that out, and then we want to place that in our company level. So we want to set the head count, but we're already going to set the head count up here, so we don't need that. I believe, yep, there it is. So it's setting the employee head count, and then it's setting the rest of these. Now let's make sure that it's actually populating the length. It is, and here's our employee data. So let's move this up here to the top. So now at the company level, it's going to declare all of these variables, and these variables are new arrays that are filtered from our employee data. So it's taking the employee data and it's filtering it by the third index, which is that third column, and that third column is the division, and it's filtering it based on this value here. And then it's doing the same for the fin division, the HR division. And then what we're doing with these variables is we are populating it after we find the length. So we're actually going through and ensuring that the length of each filtered array provides the appropriate employee count. So you'll notice that since we moved everything over 1, we're also going to have to adjust where the values are being set. So we know that this is under our company right here. This should be finance, but we can't populate it in the same column. So what we have to do is we have to adjust this 1 over to that. And then that should do it. So let's go back over to our code here, or our sheet here, excuse me, and let's refresh it. And now let's go down to People Analytics. And when we select division, we shouldn't get anything. Nothing. Good. Now when we select company, we should populate all that stuff with the appropriate length or employee numbers in there. Okay, good. So we have that. So now let's focus on this division level. So when this division level occurs, what we want to have happen is a drop down to appear here with our division list. So we already have our division list, and our division list is buried in this if statement. So what we could do is just take this division list here and move it out of our if statement and put it up in our overall function. And we can just put it up down here after this value. Okay, that way everything within the function can call it. Okay, so we have that. So now we'll come down here to our division level. And what we're wanting to do is to populate or give a validation with a list and create that drop down. Now we already did that up here. We did that right here. So what we can do is just grab this, just make a copy of this and bring it back down. And then paste it. And then what we can do is actually just change this stuff around to what we need. So it's not going to be this. It's going to be our division list. And we already have our division list. We already have our division list set up. It's up here. So we can just call that variable again right here. And then instead of this D2P rule, this is going to be drop down 3 rule. So we're going to need to change this as well. And then instead of a D2 cell, it's going to be a D3 cell. Well, we don't have a D3 cell yet. We don't have that in a variable. So let's create that variable real quick. Let's say let DD3 cell equal, and this is going to be in our dashboard. And we need to get the range, and that range, let's go back over to our sheet here. So that range is going to be row 5, column 1. So coming back over to our code, row 5, column 1. And we don't need to get the value of that. We just need to focus the eyes of the code onto that. And then it's going to set the validation with that rule. So now what should happen is if the user selects that division level, it will run this data validation and create that. Now what we're going to have to do is, since we're populating something, we're not always going to need that available. So we're going to have to come back and figure out how to clear this. So let's come up here and grab our clear our content. So this is going to clear our data validation and clear our content. And instead of, let's just have it sit right here at our company level. Because when somebody presses company level, we want to get rid of that 4 or that third drop down box sitting at row 5, column 1. So now let's just take this for a spin and see if it works the way that we're wanting it to. Let's create our drop down, refresh it. So let's select People Analytics, and let's select Division Level. Now, nothing should happen, which it didn't, except this population. So that's interesting. It's actually coming to us as like this. And the reason why it's coming to us like this is because that variable is actually stored as a two-dimensional array. So when we set a rule, let's come back over here to our code here and find a rule. You'll notice that this rule here, this canned list variable that require value in list, this value is a one-dimensional array. So what we can do is we can condense this div list down into a one-dimensional array. And how we did that was by flat. So let's see if that actually worked. See if that did the trick. And we should get a list instead of just a single row here. But it's nice that it populated that. It's nice that it populated that data validation. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so now let's go back to our People Analytics and Division Level. And we may not be able to write that in line, but we'll see. Oh, yep, we sure can. So what we did with that two-dimensional array is we used the flat method, which we covered earlier, to take a two-dimensional array and break it down into a one-dimensional array. And since we only have one inner array, we didn't have to worry about doing anything else. So that worked out perfectly. So now what we want to do is once something is selected in this third drop-down box, then it'll fire something else off. It'll start populating that stuff. Let's make sure that it clears when we change that. Okay, and it's not, so we have to clear this box here. Yeah, so we'll have to go back here and make sure that this box is cleared. So let's come back here to our code and let's grab our clear. See, we have our dashboard frame clear. We have dashboard SS get range 5. So when it selects company level, it should clear row 5, column 1. And then when we come up here, so if the change happens in A3, we're going to want to also change that or clear that. And then when we press our button, it should do it. And then when we open it, we should do it. Okay, good. So let's go back over here to our sheet and see if we were able to do just that. Yep, so that clears and then populates. Good. So let's go down to People Analytics and then populate that third drop down. Third drop down's populated. Let's change it to IT. Okay, good. Now, if we change this, it should clear everything. Yep, good. Okay, so that works. So now what we want to do is when somebody selects division level and it populates that third drop-down box, and then somebody selects HR, we want it to do something. And we have that code built in to our on edit, because remember we fine-tuned our on edit to where I mean, although it's listening for everything, it's checking to see which cell actually is changing. So we can just carry on our if statement to include a change in this cell right here. So let's come down and do that here real quick. And then we'll just fire off an alert for right now because I don't want this video to get too long. So here we have not our pop data, our on edit. There it is. Okay, so we have employee and we're looking at, there's our A3. Okay, there's our A4. So let's copy this and then we'll change it. So else if that actually equals A5, which is our third dropdown, we want to change this variable to third, if I can spell it right, and that value is going to be at 5. Now, we're not going to populate any function. We're not going to populate this function. I mean, we could, but let's keep our functions different. Let's instead not populate data. Let's populate div data. And then we can come down here and let's see, we don't need this anymore. And let's create that function. So function pop div data. And I'm going to take this opportunity to focus on our argument. So when we come up here, you'll realize that in our pop data, we are calling a variable right before we call this pop variable or this pop data from our second dropdown piece here. We are actually creating a variable to get the value of that cell. Now, we're not actually doing anything with this variable yet. In fact, we're calling this variable again down here. So there's some redundancy here. What we can do is take the value of this and pass it as an argument to our pop data. So this variable name here contains data, and that data is getting passed along with this pop data. It's essentially saying that it's going to accept data, and that data is going to be contained in this second value. So what we would do to use this is the data's coming over. I mean, it's coming to us in this function already. We just have to give it a name so we can reference it. So what we can actually do is instead of creating another variable, we can just simply assign that, we can assign that data a term, and let's just call it value. And then instead of having second DD value, now I know this confused me at first. We could simply keep this second DD value, and I'll do that just so I don't confuse anybody. But when you continuously use the same variable name, you can run into some issues. But this here should be fine. But we got rid of that extra variable here. And if we were to come back here, and I'll do it the other way with that third variable here. Let me make sure that third variable doesn't have anything in it. Yep, no, doesn't have anything in it, that pop division data. Okay, so let's refresh this, and you'll notice that it still works the same. We just passed that variable through with our function so our function can use it. I mean, essentially, we chained a function together with another function, and we can pass variables from that function and results from that function to that new function. So, yep, so you see everything works fine. Still works fine. It's just an easier way to clean up our code. So now let's do that same thing with this pop data. And we're passing, or we're collecting the value of that pop data. And let's pass that down to our pop div data. as an argument. And we could use the third DD value, but it's coming to us as data. And Google initially just doesn't care. If we don't have anything in here, we'll never be able to access that data, but it's still coming over. It's still there. So what we would like to do is just give that simply a name. And then what we can do is take that argument and pass it to something and do something with it. And in our case, let's just have an alert pop up with whatever that value is. So let's save this. And let's come back here to our sheet. We'll refresh our drop down. Drop downs here, so it'll clear that out. Yep, there we go. We'll do people analytics and we'll do company just to make sure everything works. Yep, sure does. And now when we do division, it's going to populate this second drop down here. And then when it registers a change here, it's going to fire off that code, which is then going to send that variable to that function. That function is going to run, and then it's going to use that argument, that variable that's coming to it, to populate this UI. So good. So now we have the structure built within the code, and what we can do now is create a filtered list and populate that in our dashboard, which we'll do in our next video. And then once we have that set, then we can start building out the rest of our analytics. So our next video will contain a building out the rest of this stuff here, and then we'll move on to more analytics. So I hope this video here was informative. If it was, please hit that subscribe button. And until next time, please take care.